Nagi Daifullah, a Yemeni immigrant, was an organizer in the 1973 grape strike alongside Cesar Chavez, but met his end at the hands of law enforcement.
In the 1960s, United Farm Workers, led by Cesar Chavez, organized against harsh working conditions and low pay at the hands of large California growers. They were facing exploitation and decided to build power across communities. So Filipino, Mexican, and Yemeni farm workers worked together to organize a 5-year historic strike that culminated in 1970 with the first collective bargaining agreement for workers in California ever to have been established.
When the Immigration Act was put into law in 1965, a lot of Yemeni came to America for work and a better life. California was one of the main destinations for their new lives.
Nagi Daifullah was an organizer, so he was actually hired alongside 2 other Yemeni farm workers to organize Yemenis as part of the larger grape strike. So he was hired as an organizer and was actually a picket captain. He was instrumental in building solidarity amongst the different communities. He spoke Arabic and Spanish and English and was able to translate solidarity but also translate worker power in different languages so that they could fight for their rights and actually accomplish a huge win. So he was instrumental not only in building power across communities but also in the actual victory of the grape strike. Nagi Daifullah was 24 years old when he was killed by the police. So after the win in 1970, workers had to continue to defend their win from the grape strike and boycott. And as a result, for years later, they had to still fight against the big landowners who wanted to roll back the advances of the farm workers. In 1973, there was a series of protests by farm workers to demand that the contracts be recognized, that the workers be acknowledged, that the working conditions they fought for continue to be implemented, and they were met with violent attacks by police. Nagi Daifullah was with a group of farm workers when the police attempted to violently attack them, and he came in to actually defend them. And as a result, he was violently brutalized and beat by the deputy sheriff Cooper at the time. They refused to take him to the hospital, and he ended up dying of his wounds. Nagi Daifullah's funeral procession was attended by 10,000 people. Farm workers, community members, allies, solidarity. People saw Nagi Daifullah's death as indicative of the ongoing struggle for racial and economic justice. His death also symbolized an attack on solidarity. Nagi did not just represent Yemeni farm workers. He represented Mexican farm workers. He represented Filipino farm workers. He represented all oppressed people. When the police brutalized him, it was a reminder that we have to continue to build power across communities and fight back. What was also very special about the funeral of Nagi Daifullah, the funeral was attended by Cesar Chavez, but in addition to that, they held up the Yemeni flag. But not just the Yemeni flag. What was very special about that protest is they held up a Surat Gamal Abdel Nasser, the image of the leader, the anti-colonial Arab nationalist from Egypt who had passed away. Holding up that photo reflected what Nagi's legacy also reflected. As people fighting against colonialism, racism, injustice anywhere, he really deepened an understanding of solidarity and internationalism across workers, not only in California, but across the world. People got the news of Nagi's murder all over the world, including the Arab world. And people got the news of the beautiful march and protest with Gamal Abdel Nasser's photo, with solidarity across Mexican, Filipino, and Yemeni farm workers, and everybody saying the death of Nagi Daifullah is an injustice and will continue to fight back. That's why until today we honor him. And 2 years after his death, California finally institutionalized by law and policy the rights of workers for collective bargaining. That is also his legacy. He both reflected his legacy is both in terms of the spirit of solidarity that continues to exist across our Arab communities and other communities of color, but also he institutionalized the win. His death made it so that people continue to fight back and ensure that what they fought for from 1965 to 1970 continues to be possible today.
So Nagi Daifullah is a representation of Arab immigrants who had to leave their homelands for better working conditions, and yet they still fought for dignified living conditions in the workplace and also in society. And he's also an inspiration to all Yemeni youth and Arab youth here in this country until this day, 50 years later, because he empowers them. When they read about him, he empowers them to take part in decision making in the social justice movement here in this country, and also feel a sense of belonging here to this country. And he represents also a long history of social justice movements and interconnected struggles with other workers of color and marginalized groups in this country.
His legacy lives on amongst Yemenis in the labor industry, such as Ahmed Yahya Mushrif, who worked as a grape picker in the 70s and remembered Nagi. And it was Nagi's memory that Mushrif hoped would remind his fellow generals of the importance of speaking up for themselves when their contracts comes up for a renewal.